Adam Taxin here in South Florida with Sharona Whisler, who is the Executive Director of the Florida chapter of the Zionist Organization of America, which is big down here, predictably enough, ZOA, as you may know it. The most pro-Israel group in America for all practical purposes, except for some Christian groups, which are really gung-ho, maybe.
Thank God for all of the Christian groups.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we're going to talk about, as advertised, current issues facing Israel, on which she's much more of an expert than I am. I've been slacking in terms of keeping up with certain news lately, including Israel, and Middle East politics, and President Trump's performance of ours. So, Sharon, thank you for joining me here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I think the audience is going to love it.
I hope so.
So, where do we begin? You want to talk about the embassy first? Or, I mean, fortunately, Israel hasn't been in the news that much, which is generally a good sign given its neighbors and the hostility that it endures. I mean, no big stories involving rockets or terrorism the last few weeks.
Right. There are always issues that are ongoing. Yeah. So the embassy the U.S. Embassy being in Jerusalem is one of those issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the issues that the Zionist Organization of America has always been a proponent of. The U.S. Embassy belongs in Israel's capital, in Jerusalem, just as the U.S. Embassy is in the capital of every other country where we have an embassy.
Can you take us through the history of that to the extent you can?
Well, Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people. It's never been the capital of any other people besides the Jewish people because of our history and our heritage in that holy city, which makes it very important to the Jewish people. And so it makes sense that that is the capital of the Jewish state. It's where our temples have been, and it's always been considered the capital of the Jewish people. So that's just the fact. That's where it is.
Obviously, 1948, when Jerusalem was not fully unified, they weren't going to and it was very close to the war, the war lines. The capital wasn't going to be in Jerusalem then. I don't even know if the capital was Jerusalem of Israel when the actual move took place. Was it after 1967, after the war and the acquisition of territory defensively?
Well, that we're talking about Eastern Jerusalem.
Yes.
So where
the wall,
where the Temple Mount is and where the Western Wall is. So that area was regained after the 1967
Which
war.
was a defensive war,
right?
Of course.
So during 1948 and 1967, Jews had no access to the eastern part of Jerusalem.
Which I want to point out was not in some sort of so-called Palestinian entity, but was basically absorbed by Jordan.
Correct, right, which was created as a result, Transjordan. And during that time, actually, there were no leaders from any Arab countries that visited Jerusalem at that time.
It's not mentioned in the Quran either.
It isn't.
Yeah.
So
quite a few churches too there. We will point that out. It's not just
right.
Jewish and Muslim.
I mean, it's a historically very religious city in general. So the regaining access and control over Eastern Jerusalem was a huge victory in 1967, and very exciting and a very proud moment for the Jewish people in 1967. And actually, we're celebrating this year the 50th anniversary of the reunification of that city.
What is the date? Do we do it on the Jewish calendar or the?
The date is, I think it is
June something.
May.
Okay.
I think it's May 21st.
Okay. On the Jewish calendar.
It's called Yom Yerushalayim.
Gotcha.
Jerusalem.
So that's earlier this year because it was June 6th. It's the weirdest thing, by the way. I mean, I digress here. You always, I think in 1948, we think of May 14th, 1948, but it was like the latest possible time it could be that day on the Jewish calendar. So Israel Independence Day was just so late that particular year, but it's always celebrated in April or like the first week of May.
Generally May 14th,
yeah.
Because May 14th was when that's just a significant date.
The UN, resolution went into effect, but I think you can celebrate it on the Jewish calendar anytime between like April 16th and May 14th.
Well, actually, it happened. It was announced over the radio before that date, and then the Arab armies from all the surrounding Arab countries invaded.
Unofficially,
right.
I'm just saying it's just weird with like what date it lines up. I
Between
always
the
wait,
Jewish
it's
date
Israel
and the
independence.
secular.
I always associate it with May 14th, never the Jewish date, but it's always earlier on the secular calendar. So that's a little digression here. We're not trying to distract from the big point.
Okay.
And when did the push to move the U.S. Embassy really start? Was it after '67? Was it sometime in the '70s? Sometime in the '80s? Or do you just not know?
I'm
You weren't
not
alive,
sure.
obviously.
I'm not sure when the push was. I just know that as long as I've been involved with ZOA, it's something that we've always been talking about. It's always been one of our issues, and it's one of the reasons why I recognize ZOA as an organization that really values true Zionist principles that are meaningful and really important, that keep the strong pride in Zionism and Israel alive.
Wait, before I want to just go back on something here. Before we get into Trump on this issue and previous presidents on that particular issue, a lot of people may be out there saying, I don't know ZOA, I know AIPAC. I know the AD, obviously the ADL is not an Israel organization. They know certain organizations, especially AIPAC, which had its conference a week ago. Can you distinguish to the extent that is politically correct, ZOA from AIPAC?
Okay. I can just talk about ZOA in general. I can talk about our issues. So the Zionist Organization of America is one of the oldest pro-Israel organizations in the country. We're actually celebrating, it's a lot of anniversaries this year. So along with the 50th anniversary of the reunification of Jerusalem, it's also the 120th anniversary of the first World Zionist Congress, which was in 1897, and that's also when ZOA was established. You know, at the time, 1897, that's before Israel became a state.
Right, 20 years before the Balfour Declaration.
Right, and that was in 1948. That was really seeing the fruition of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears of the movement.
Funny you mentioned that. I was going to be doing an interview about the group Blood, Sweat, and Tears this morning on psychedelic rock, but it's just that's why we would have done a video, so you could have gotten familiar. It was supposed to be with Akiva Shapiro, but he went back to bed before sunrise. Yeah.
So now we have a Jewish state, but the moment that we take that for granted, then we really use it, and there's still there are a lot of challenges that the Zionist movement faces, and it's still so important that we're here and that we're doing what we need to do. And what we do is the focus is Israel advocacy through education. So ZOA has a fantastic campus department on campuses. We're active on campuses across the country, and we bring student leaders to Israel twice a year. And the trip is unique because we bring students to the border regions of Israel, Israel's strategic borders, and they have private meetings with Knesset members.
You're talking about the Golan in particular, and also Judea and Samaria?
For sure, yes. And we visit communities in Judea and Samaria so that they can get to know what these communities are like and the people that live there, who are really wonderful and good people. And to connect to those communities and those areas, to recognize that's just part of Israel, and not even more so, because those are the holiest and most biblical parts of the land of Israel. So we find that's important to connect
that's true.
students.
I didn't even think about that.
It really is.
Tel Aviv obviously has no part in the Bible, but
right,
well, Gaza's pretty big in the Samson story. Gaza.
So we, just last week, I had the privilege of hearing Knesset member Tzipi Hotoveli speak, and she was actually talking about that. She said that if we don't have a claim to the communities in Judea and Samaria, then we have no
which
claim.
The media calls the West Bank.
We have no claim to Tel Aviv, because our history is really here tracking, all of these places that are mentioned in the Bible. You'll find that they're the places in Judea and Samaria. Those are the places that are mentioned. So that's
not that Haifa and Tel Aviv aren't important.
It's all important.
Right.
But I think people tend to separate, and that the communities in the West Bank are a different story, and they put it to the side. So on our trips, we want to make sure that students connect to those communities. We also have a Center for Law and Justice, which takes on cases regarding anything that affects Israel or the Jewish people from a legal perspective, like anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and propaganda, especially on college campuses.
Do you deal with BDS?
Yes, we do a lot with BDS. We have,
Can you
that's what our
explain that from the
campus
beginning?
department is very focused on activism against the BDS movement.
Can you explain what the BDS movement is?
Sure. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement Against Israel, and it's really an anti-Semitic movement, which is devoted to the destruction of Israel. It seeks to destroy Israel by imposing sanctions and getting companies to divest from Israel when it's damaging not just to the Jewish state, but of course, if anyone really cares about Palestinian Arabs, it's very damaging to them as well, because they lose their jobs if it's successful.
Yeah, I mean, for example, what was it? SodaStream. Wasn't there an issue with that? They had a lot of Palestinian workers.
Right, that's a great example. So if they're claiming that it's to pursue justice on behalf of Palestinian Arabs, it's really doing just the opposite. Mm-hmm. We also have a government relations department on Capitol Hill that regularly lobbies our congressmen and senators. Mm-hmm. So from an issues perspective, ZOA's issues that are unique to the organization, which you wouldn't necessarily find maybe other organizations doing, is the supporting the communities in Judea and Samaria, and the issue of moving the embassy, and also cutting off aid to the Palestinian Authority, which is something that we're always lobbying for, that our tax dollars shouldn't be going to support terrorism and the funding of terrorists while they're
and especially corruption.
I mean, all
so
of it. It just makes absolutely no sense. That's our
countries.
money, and I don't want that money to be going towards the killing of anybody. But this is, the strategic and incitement to kill Jews.
I want to get back to Israel for a second, but if someone's saying this sounds like a great organization, I want to know more about it. I want to get in touch. I want to get involved, especially if people are not in Florida where it's not so active. What can they do?
You can join the organization. You can go to www.zoa.org, and you can get, if you are in Florida, you can look up our Florida information. We have a Florida webpage as well. You can also email me, florida@zoa.org, and like our Facebook page, which is Zionist Organization of America, Florida. And we do have a lot of activities and events nationally and locally. We have a lobbying mission coming up this summer, June 6th. And the more people that we get to come and represent, the better.
I want to talk about Trump a little bit. He's only 2 months into the presidency, or a little more than 2 months into the presidency right now. He's been a little wishy-washy on the embassy move, but his ambassador to Israel, I mean, he really hit a home run with that. That's the ZOA's position.
Oh, of course. David Friedman is fantastic. He's a very proud Zionist, and that just makes sense to have a proud Zionist in that position as the closeness of our allies. It just makes sense. I mean, the Zionism is the movement that's responsible for the creation of the State of Israel, so why wouldn't you have a Zionist as the U.S. ambassador to Israel? And
he's a Jewish Zionist. I mean, we were all very excited when the rumor was out that Huckabee was going to be ambassador to Israel, because he's a strong Christian Zionist, but he chose a Jewish Zionist.
Right. So I think David Friedman would also like to see the embassy in Jerusalem, and I believe that he plans to be working from Jerusalem, no matter what happens. But we are not hearing the same kind of commitment that we were at the beginning when Trump made announcements about moving the embassy, and now it hasn't happened yet, and he has been, somewhat quiet, but we'll really see what happens in this summer when he has the opportunity to sign what every president has signed and waive that movement, or actually make it happen.
Yeah, there is a long history of presidents saying they were going to do it and then pulling like a Lucy with Charlie Brown and then say, oh, no, not doing it. I don't know if Barack Obama even pretended to do it, that he was going to do it. It's almost like maybe have to give him more credit for not pretending that he was a friend of Israel that way. But we'll see about Trump. Any thoughts about any other issues? I mean, fortunately, it's been fairly uneventful in terms of big conflicts during the 2+ months President Trump has been in there. Obviously, the UN occurred. Barack Obama tried to stick that UN end vote.
So I will say, just regarding to the unfortunate long period of time that the only way that the U.S. could talk about the future of Israel was in the context of a two-state solution, and ZOA has always considered that concept really a misnomer, that a two-state solution isn't a solution for peace in that area. It's really a Palestinian state solution, because Israel is already a state, and it's not something that will bring peace. And if that's what we're really hoping for, then we have to rework the strategy, because there's a slew of examples of how the so-called two-state solution has failed, and it's actually damaging and I think dangerous to continue to push it. And it's a position that ZOA has never held, and that's one of the ways that ZOA stands out from other organizations, and it's one of the reasons why I'll be celebrating my 10-year anniversary with the organization. I was very involved as a student at a college and planning events, and I worked with a lot of
Where did you go to college?
I went to George Washington University.
So you were right in the heart of everything.
Very exciting place to go to school. And I worked with a lot of different organizations, but ZOA stood out because of the positions that it would take on important issues that I felt other organizations weren't really taking a stand on, and I thought it was necessary. And I knew that if I was going to work for an Israel-related organization, it had to be one that I would be proud to stand by those positions, and ZOA is that organization, and I still feel that way, 10 years later, still so honored and proud to work for this organization.
There was something else. I know we're supposedly winding down, but I heard a lot of people raving about Nikki Haley over Shabbos, and it just occurred to me, I got to ask you about Ambassador Haley.
That's also another really strong choice. President Trump and his position appointments with David Friedman and Nikki Haley, it's definitely going in the right direction. And they have been very outspoken and proud Israel supporters and Zionists, and it's really refreshing to see that.
Any other final thoughts you want to say about anything related to Israel, or anything you want to say in general?
I'll just say that if you agree with some of the positions that I've talked about regarding ZOA, take a look at the website. Like I said, ZOA.org. And if you find that you agree with our issues and our positions, and you think we need a stronger voice, then please join us in making our voice stronger and helping us spread our messages and become a ZOA member. We're only as strong as our support, and that all depends on the viewers that are watching this.
And who they send it to.
Correct.
You don't have to watch it live. It's okay if you watch it later. The issues will not go away. Sharona Whisler, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Adam.